So it is coming into spring here in Canada, but you might be able to see out the window here that we have had quite a bit of snow recently. However, even though it's wintry outside, summer is just around the corner. I can taste it, it's so close. And it's this time of year that we start planning all of our adventures for hiking and photography that are going to come in a few months' time. And if you guys are planning your own adventures, this video will help. Here are my top hikes for photography in the Canadian Rockies.
Starting off in Canmore, I think the east end of Rundle offers some of the best sunset views anywhere in the Rockies, and this is one of my favourite summits to shoot from in the evenings. This 6 kilometre return hike is short and steep, with over 850 metres of elevation gain to be conquered, so it's not to be taken lightly. The access to this trail is just a short drive from the town of Canmore, making it a favourite with tourists and locals alike. One of the best things about this trail is you don't actually need to make it to the summit to get great images. Around 45 minutes to an hour into the trail, you get photogenic views of Harling Peak across the valley and Whiteman's Pond below. This spot is great for sunset, sunrise, or even astrophotography. However, if you do make it to the summit, you'll be rewarded with 360-degree views. The Bow Valley on one side, and never-ending layered ridgelines to the other. Another short hike with some great accessibility is Sulfur Mountain in Banff. I feel like Sulfur Mountain making this list might come as a bit of a surprise to some, as it isn't the most adventurous hike. However, I think the views from the Sanson's Peak boardwalk on the summit are some of the best you're going to get of the town of Banff. The hike is 11 kilometres return at a more steady grade than that of the east end of Rundle, with only 700 metres of gain on a well-maintained trail, making it a more manageable walk for most people. On top of that, if you aren't feeling the walk, you can always take the gondola to the summit. From the top, you'll get views of the town below and Cascade Mountain in the background. This scene photographs especially well during Blue Hour in the winter, when the town is snow-covered with the warm glow of lights lining the roads. As well as that main shot, bring along a longer focal length and grab some cropped-in shots of the valley below as that dappled light makes its way through the landscape. Now moving on deeper into Canonascis, Rawson Lake and Sorrel Ridge offer a couple of great opportunities to capture portfolio-worthy images. The hike to the lake is pretty easy going at just 8 kilometres return with 300 metres of gain. The trail is well defined, making access possible for even beginner hikers. And if you hike in the early morning, you'll find perfect reflections and warm light on the distant headwall waiting for you when you arrive. Now, if you have it in you to hike up to the Sorrel Ridge, it's definitely worth it. This can be quite strenuous as it covers the same elevation gain as up to the lake, but in just 1 kilometre of distance. There are some ropes there to aid the hike, but it's slippery and can be tough going. Once at the ridgeline, however, you'll be treated to jaw-dropping views over the Canonascis lakes. Do be warned though that this hike is not only home to large mountain goats, but also plenty of grizzly bears too. It isn't a hike I'd recommend doing alone. Lake Agnes and the Beehives is one of the main trails in Lake Louise and can definitely be heavily trafficked. However, because of this though, the trail is well signposted, it's wide, well kept and easy to follow, and it can be tackled by hikers of all abilities. The hike to the lake is about 7.5 kilometres return with 500 metres of gain and options to add on multiple side trips. The hike has an abundance of photographic opportunities along its path, which is always a great way to break up a trail, and on this one I'm always pleasantly surprised. There is opportunity at Mirror Lake, at waterfalls along the way, as well as Lake Agnes itself. Here you can shoot reflections of the headwall in the lake or hike round the back and capture the tea house sat on the cliff edge. From here you can head up onto one or both of the Beehives, giving you great views over Lake Louise and the valley below. I love to grab a long lens here and pick out different compositions of, say, the braided river, the mountains, or kayakers on the lake. Now, you may have heard of the Larch Valley, and it is exceptional, especially if you haven't seen it before. I used to make a tradition of trying to shoot sunrise up here at least once a year. However, in recent years, access has become more difficult. The trail starts at Moraine Lake, which by now you probably know isn't open to personal vehicles, so you'll either have to fight your way onto a Parks Canada shuttle bus or pay for a private transfer. I've left a couple of recommendations in the description below. From Moraine Lake, it's a 9 kilometre return hike with 600 metres of gain. During fall, the larch trees come alive on this trail, and there are plenty of places to stop and take pictures of the sun illuminating the golden pine needles. The star of the show, however, has to be what I call the lake with no name. The main lake on the trail is called Lake Ministima. However, if you turn off to the right a few hundred metres beforehand, the lake down here offers picture-perfect reflections of the Valley of the Ten Peaks and those larch trees. In full, this location is pretty hard to beat. After hiking this trail for sunrise many years ago, I haven't stopped thinking about going back. Sulfur Skyline in Jasper National Park is an 8-kilometre return hike with 800 metres of gain. Now, the trail itself isn't overly photogenic, with the majority of it winding through dense forest. However, when you break the tree line and reach the summit, the views are something else. The morning light skims the top of mountains as the valley winds in between cloud-piercing peaks. This multi-day hike is probably one of the best trails you can do if walking away with portfolio-worthy images is your aim. The trail to Berg Lake and back is around 42 kilometres return, with 1,100 metres of elevation gain, with multiple campsites along the way. On the way to the lake, there are several great photo spots like Kinney Lake and, of course, Emperor Falls. However, the best of it can be found around Berg Lake itself and on side hikes up to Toboggan Falls and around Mum Basin. In the mornings, Mount Robson and its glacier reflect perfectly in Berg Lake during a still morning, and the views from Mum Basin are the home to some of the most iconic images in the Canadian Rockies. These multi-day hikes can, however, be a little hard to organise logistically and do take some planning. If you want to know more, be sure to check out my website where I have some in-depth breakdowns of how to get to these locations. There's some links in the description below. If you're in the area and you're a photographer, Berg Lake is not to be missed. Another iconic multi-day trip has to be Mount Assiniboine, and there are several ways to get to the area. Whether you hike in or take a helicopter ride, once you're there, the best trail for photography has to be the Niblet hike. This short trail starting from Lake Magog takes you up to the view that many of you may recognise, as it's become pretty famous on social media over the years. When I visit Mount Assiniboine to shoot, this is where we spend almost every sunrise and sunset. The view is simply that good. You'll get views of Mount Assiniboine and Sunburst Peak, as well as the lakes below. And if you're able to get there during larch season, the views are even better. Flow Lake is situated on the Rockwall Trail, but you can visit Flow Lake in just a day. The hike to Flow Lake is a 20-kilometre out and back with 730 metres of gain, the majority of which comes in the last couple of kilometres. This lake again is one of those locations that is hard to believe is even real. The imposing headwall on the other side of the lake is hard to take in visually and even harder to capture in one shot. You'll definitely need a wide-angle lens here. The hike is short enough to be possible in a single day, but if you can secure a camping spot, which nowadays is very difficult, it's definitely worth it, because waking up at the lakefront is pretty hard to beat. The fall colours during larch season are just the cherry on the top. Then from here you can extend your hike another 5 kilometres round trip up to Numa Pass, a viewpoint that's worth a hike at any time of year, full of wildflowers in the summer and larch trees in the fall. Venturing a little further afield into Rogers Pass, and technically not in the Rockies, but this one's a freebie, we have the Hermit Trail and Hermit Meadows. Part of the Selkirk mountain range, this 7-kilometre return trail with 800 metres of elevation gain can easily be done in a day. However, if you're lucky enough to be able to bag a campsite in the meadows, I would highly recommend doing so. The first section of trail winds on through the trees, but once you're at the top and the view opens up, you are rewarded with views of Mount Macdonald across the valley. Up at the meadows, not only do you have an incredibly scenic toilet, but also scenic tent pads to pitch up for the night. The photography up here is absolutely fantastic with lots of opportunities. There are potential reflection pools, cascading waterfalls, and lots of foreground options. When we stayed, we were blessed with a cloud inversion, and it was the best morning of photography I've had in years. Now, these are just a snippet of the hundreds of hikes and photography locations in the Canadian Rockies. Now, if you are interested in more photography locations, many of which that are a lot easier to access, then be sure to download my photography location guide, which really helps support this channel. There's a link in the description below you can use, or scan the QR code on screen. And as always, thank you so much for watching.